What's up, guys? Hope you're feeling alive right now. I'm Micah Keneally.
And I'm Josiah Keneally, and you're tuning in to the Young Adults Today podcast, where we talk about reaching the next generation in our world today.
Yes, and like always, if you are just tuning in, we kick off a new episode, hopefully to help you start your week stronger every single Monday. So if you want to subscribe, rate, or review, we would love to hear from you, and not only hear from you, but hear what God's doing in your life. Hear what you're learning from some of our guests, our speakers, and maybe what you can take to the workplace, the marketplace, or even the ministry. So we just want to say thank you so much for tuning in and listening. And speaking of listening, we have an amazing guest that I can't wait to listen to. It's my first time meeting her, and it's always fun to have a female on the podcast because sometimes we realize that leaders are in short supply, right? And to find female leaders that are doing amazing things, that have the time outside of mom and work and everything else, is always a joy. And I know that Josiah, your path actually crossed with hers not too long ago. So why don't you just introduce her to the podcast and let the listener in today?
Here we go. We're joined by Faith Cho. Faith, we're pumped and fired up to just chat with you today. So thanks for your time, but how are you?
I am doing great. It's an honor to be here. You guys are a powerhouse couple. I could even just sitting for the first 2 minutes, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's an honor. So I'm glad to be here.
It's really incredible. And when we met, it was at kind of a young leaders conference. And I remember meeting you with a whole group of people in the airport. And I think masks were still required in airports at the time, but you gave everyone a hug and we hopped in vans and we went to this conference and just heard tremendous insight and wisdom from you. So excited to pick your brain on, thoughts of leadership and the next generation. But for the listener today, Faith Cho has been a gospel preacher since she was 19 years old. Currently, she's a pastor, pastor's wife. They've planted an amazing church in Manhattan. She's a writer, an itinerant speaker. Faith is also the founder of the Honor Summit. We'll talk about her nonprofit organization that centers Asian American women in the mission of God.
So
Simply
good.
incredible. And alongside of her husband, David, she is the co-founder and co-pastor of Mosaic Covenant Church in New Jersey. And her most precious role, however, is being a mom to 4 kiddos. And isn't parent life the best life?
It is. I would say it's the most enriching part. And I know some moms are like, oh, you're lying. But it is hard, but it's like all my stories come from my time with my kids, all my revelations, my insights, my special God moments when I watch them. So yeah, it's a special experience for sure.
And there's never a dull moment. We only have two. And Josiah, whenever we find ourselves stressed out, we're like, why did we ever get stressed out over one, let alone 4, right?
No
So
exaggeration. I've
God
said
is
that
good.
many times.
But it's a good thing. It's a great thing, actually. Faith, for the person who is just tuning in, who may not know you or your story, can you just help us understand like your journey of life and just your story of like how you got to where you are today?
Yes, I mean, that's such a wow, what a layered question. But
Give us the
uh,
highlight reel.
yes, the highlight reel would be I was born in Korea, but moved here when I was 4, maybe 5. I don't even remember. It was like 4 to 5. And then, but I got saved in Mexico. And then and then I started ministry at a young age, around 19 years old. For me, it was just when I encountered Jesus, I was, for lack of better words, I was ruined for the world. I just couldn't do anything else. I tried, but I everything, reading about anything, thinking about anything else was just kind of a bore. And so when people ask, oh, what got you into ministry so young? For me, it was just simply I didn't want to do anything else. I mean, obviously I went to college, I got a master's, that all that was part of it. But yeah, I went into ministry at 19, and I thought initially, oh, like me loving Jesus, wanting to minister in the name of Jesus, that's it. Like I thought that's all there was to it. Obviously, there were layers in my journey, being a woman, also being an Asian American woman,
Mhm.
also being a young mother, and on top of that, being a pastor's wife. not just being a pastor and minister myself, but being a pastor's wife, there were just so many layers to my journey that brought about the Honor Summit, which is what is nonprofit organization that I'm leading today. That it's, I was shocked in some ways, but also I had to go through this learning curve of realizing, oh, maybe it's not as simple as just loving Jesus and loving people and just navigating through that. And yes, my husband and I, we have planted in New Jersey, Mosaic Covenant Church. And that was just a journey in and of itself. And it wasn't even that, it wasn't just, oh, we want to plant a church and we could do it. There was some layers to that experience, being an Asian American pastoral couple.
Wow.
In the middle of a pandemic.
Oh
So yeah, a lot of that, everything that I am, everything that I've done, everything that I have today, I kid you not, it was just grace of God. And I'm not saying that as like a brag or just throwing Christianese at things. It's just the grace of God. I am fully aware and acknowledge that I had little to do with it, basically, is my point.
It's so powerful. And I remember hearing you kind of shortly after planting the church, which you did. I know you and your husband and family planted a church right in the middle of the pandemic. And I'd just love if you're willing to share some of those miraculous testimonies of how God did show up during the process, because I know it wasn't easy. Church planting is not for the faint of heart to begin with.
Right.
And then you throw in a global pandemic and it's just like, oh my gosh, can we do this? God, there's just always, when you...
Are you sure, Lord? Did we hear you right? Are
exactly.
we crazy?
So we want to hear from you about, like, how did God show up and what was the journey like?
Yeah. I mean, we were truly 100% having to depend on Jesus for this whole process. It was by far the most formative season of my life. I think oftentimes when you have a dream for something, you want to lean on resources, strategy, your own ability, your own connections. And God had a way of teaching us that literally none of that mattered. That if you wanted to birth a miracle, you just need faith in the presence of God.
Yes.
And that was tough, right? Because being powerless and vulnerable is truly such an uncomfortable situation when you're trying to do something that requires so much power and strength. To birth a church is truly a God thing. I am now fully convinced that every church that stands is a miracle from God, even if it's a bad church. It's just a miracle that it stands, that it's running. It's just by God's grace. Because I mean, there was a time when we did have a lot of the pieces in line. We had a building, we had a team, we had income, and it looked like, oh, this is it. This is gonna be it, right? Pandemic hit, literally within like 2-3 weeks, we lose everything. We lose the people, we lose the building, we lose the income, we lose our connections, everything. And not only that, we had to move out of our home, which was our former church's parsonage. They gave us the lovely grace of moving out in the summer and not in the, when we left that church. And so, we were literally like, forget planning a church. We were near homeless, right?
And by the way, this is in a crowded space, like that it's not just easy to like, oh, okay, we're going to live there or there. Like, real estate's crazy.
Not only that, it was during the pandemic, which was the great exodus of the city. Everyone was trying to leave New York. So I kid you not, when we started looking for homes, there were already lines of cars filled with New Yorkers already willing to pay above the rent ask. And so the competition was crazy. And so literally everything was just impossible. Putting 4 kids on Zoom was impossible. right? Like planning a church was impossible. And I literally had moments with God where I said, God, I don't even think I'm popular enough for this. Like let alone money. I don't have enough friends. I don't have any more numbers in my phone. Like it's just I don't have it. All we had was just Jesus. And I know that sounds so naive to some, but there were moments when we were asking God, Lord, what are we supposed to do? Who are we supposed to call? Should we try to get a second job? Should we try, like we would ask God every turn, Lord, what do we do? What do we do? And for a couple months, the only thing that he led us to do was just spend time with him, adore him, love him. So as a family, and this is during the lockdown, we would just do communion with the 4 kids and the dog. Like we would just do communion. And there were moments when I thought, man, this is a big waste of time. We're about to be homeless. We're, like we're fools. Like nobody believes in this church but us, right? But we just spent time communing with God. And I remember in that season, the kids would just be celebrating because children do not know how to be faithless. For them, faith is just so easy. And they were just celebrating. They were celebrating. This house is going to be great. This church is going to be beautiful. Like they were just celebrating. And I really believe they were worshiping Jesus on my behalf, on my husband's behalf, because we were just so just in a place of grief during that time because we just didn't know. Like we have to sometimes unlearn how to do things in order to genuinely walk in faith. And that's what God was doing. We had so many of the resources. I mean, I've been in ministry at that point 15 years, now 17 years, right? I mean, I wasn't like a veteran, I wouldn't say, but I wasn't a novice either. So, I mean, I've watched ministries grow. I kind of know how to do certain things. None of that mattered in that moment. All God wanted was for me to just turn on my faith. And so we would just spend those weeks, months, just worshiping God, celebrating God. And you know what? Sometimes God takes a while to work all of a sudden. Like, and here we are. We're not homeless. We were never homeless, right? God led us to the home that was in the town that he called us to plant. We launched in February and now we're here.
It's always fun to be on the other side of the storm or the other side of the mountain, or on the mountaintop, I should say, right?
Yeah. And I think when people hear those stories, they're like, oh, I want that. I want to live for Jesus just like that. But in the beginning part of it, it's beautiful on the flip side, right? In retrospect. And you know what? In retrospect, now I have people from all over being like, wow, I support you and I celebrate what God has done. But you know what? Like sometimes what faith requires is for you to believe in what God is saying when nobody else wants to believe you and when nobody cares about what you're up to. And some people don't even know what's even needed in terms of ministry, right? It may be just you that sees something and thinks like, this is what's needed and this is what God has called me to do, and so it was rough but beautiful.
It's amazing. And I'm just taking to the verse like, don't worry about for tomorrow will worry about itself. It's easy to read that and see the faithfulness of God throughout scripture on multiple occasions, but when you're in the thick of it and you're trying to uncover and discover and unlearn to relearn how we're truly supposed to be wired when it comes to faith, when it comes to believing in God, when it comes to going back to our first love. And like you kind of already said, like the kids were having a blast, and kids will only will only absorb what the parents are willing to portray, right? If you were the one running around frantic like Henny Penny, we don't have any money, we're gonna lose the home, this ministry's like, this is a stupid idea, like whatever words come out of your mouth, your children absorb. And for you to like, okay, we're going to do communion. We're going to sit in the presence of God. And for them just to experience that, I bet when you talk to them 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, they're going to recall the season that you just described as probably one of their favorite seasons ever in life. And it's just those pivotal moments, right? And I know many of our listeners, they're at a pivotal moment, whether they're going back into the workforce coming out of COVID, or they're trying to regain momentum from something that they've already started the last couple years. And I would just be so curious. So we have a lot of women also that listen to this podcast who are doing ministry, vocational ministry, marketplace ministry, whatever that is and looks like. And Faith, I would just be curious, what have you found as a woman in leadership, as a pastor? How do you overcome the obstacles of an not oversaturated, but saturated with men, when you are a woman trying to find your voice and try to actively respond and be obedient and carry the mantle that God has given you in the thick of it? Like, what do you have to say for somebody who's like, I'm called to ministry, where are all the female leaders, where's a female mentor that I can trust, that's not gonna like compete, compare, or kind of try to control aspects and elements of me, or say silly things like, well, I prayed you into that role, you know? So how have you, I don't know, not overcome, but what have you seen, and how would you encourage the listener in that regard today as a female called into ministry? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the confident woman in ministry is a presence-centered woman. Not a community-centered woman, not a calling-centered woman, not a platform-centered woman, but a presence-centered woman. So as in to say, when you live to just know Jesus,
Right.
none of that really matters. For lack of better words, it's just true. It's just like, and this is what I tell my girls all the time, where they're like, oh, she doesn't like me, or that I'm like, it really does not matter. Like, as in, what she thinks of you, you know, unless it's like proper accountability, right? It does not affect your God-given call. Our call will go from the pits to the palace, regardless of the Potiphar's wives, the pharaohs. It will not matter what the brothers think. It will not matter what injustice comes your way. It is God's to bring into light. It is God's to carry. And oftentimes, you know, Joseph's life, and this is all in reference to Joseph's life, like it looked like it was going backwards, right? And and I think if Joseph, to be honest, was a 21st century millennial, he'll be stuck in Potiphar's home fighting the injustice of everything that's going on and just being like, wow, I am so offended and this is so not right. And I gotta look out for me and I gotta draw a line because you're a red flag. Like I feel like it could get so complicated. But what did Joseph do in every scene of his life? He stewarded what was before him. He was loyal to the God that brought him there. And it was actually a preparation for the next season. Every step like after the pit was a step closer to the palace. When he was in Potiphar's home, he wasn't just a slave. He was learning Egyptian culture.
Right.
He was understanding Egyptian soil. Like he was understanding how to run a home. Like he was understanding the language. He was being prepared to be at the right hand of Pharaoh later. It wasn't like a pause. It wasn't due to, oh, like somebody just overlooking you or just trying to stomp out your voice. Every season can be useful to God. And so to the woman that feels discouraged because, man, it's an all-male space, I feel very oppressed, I feel very misunderstood, overlooked. Like, and none of that is okay, by the way. And there's none of me saying like, oh, it's fine, just get over it. Like, it's not that at all. But it is to say that none of that compares to God's sovereign hand in your life. And you just have to praise the Lord where you're at. I know that sounds so silly, right? But as in to honor God in the season that you're in, steward what's before you,
Right.
And lean on him for the next breakthrough. You know, when Joseph was a slave, he was the best slave there ever was, right? When he was a prisoner, he was the best prisoner there ever was. And he just took hold of those moments to the point where when the baker and the cupbearer was like, I had a dream, he was like, yep, this is my God moment. He was so in line with God in all the seasons of his life that he was able to capture those kairos moments, those God moments, to be able to walk into that breakthrough. The Lord does have a space for the woman that wants to go into ministry. The Lord does have a call for her. And all those other things, they tend to be somewhat distractions from what the presence of God has for the
I love
person.
it. Faith, thank you so much for going there, because I think sometimes when people are discouraged, they'd rather stay in the wilderness than seek the
Yeah.
oasis, right?
Yeah.
They would rather sit in the wilderness and like mourn, lick their own wounds versus say, you know what? No, God has called me. He is sovereign, and I'm going to steward and cultivate what He's given me, whether it's 10 girls in a Bible study in my dorm room or in my house, or it's 10,000. Like, God is He's going to do something of this, and He's preparing me, but my character, it needs to be developed. It cannot outweigh my charisma or this desire that I have, right? So I just want to say thank you for going there. And I think Joseph and Moses are like my two Bible crushes, I call them. Because I think
love
there's so
it.
much we can learn from them, and it's just encouraging to hear and to know that God has a place for everybody if
Yeah.
we're willing, and when we're willing. He's just working on our hearts and making sure that our hearts are tender, and any soil that He has to, turn up in our in the weeding process, weeding out of ourselves instead of demanding a platform or demanding a microphone. He wants us to have something to say from His heart, not from our own circumstances. So that's so good. Thanks for going there.
Definitely. And you might have been speaking to the young female who is navigating their own journey, but I think I just learned as much listening as anyone, because I'm not a female. And so my awareness of what it would be like to be journeying and navigating a call into ministry, into that space, I think it's important for me to listen, for me to take note, and for me to observe and ask questions, listen, care. And similarly to that, I look at the obvious, right? I am a male and I'm also white. And so I think that also there's a degree of awareness culturally that I need to navigate. What is it, the experience of a female in leadership, or for people who are non-white? What is it like to navigate that? And Faith, so much of the work that you're doing with the Honor Summit is, if you can touch on the Honor Summit as well, but I'd love to hear the process also about, in America, what your journey in leadership as an Asian American woman has been like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as said before, there were layers. And it wasn't as simple as, hey, I have a conviction and I could just share it and people will hear me. There were layers whenever I speak, or whenever I disciple or mentor young Asian American women that want to do ministry. I always say, unfortunately, you will have to be smarter, better, on time, more on top of it, just to be taken almost as seriously at times.
Wow.
Now, is that to say, oh, we're better than everyone? Not at all. But as in to say, like, there are oftentimes a lot that keeps us from being able to be taken as seriously or have the same authority. And by authority, I don't mean spiritual authority that God gives us, but just authority amongst people. It just takes a bit, like, as in to say, like, sometimes I would speak with some of my non-colored friends, for lack of better words, white friends, basically. Sometimes I would speak with some of my white friends and be like, if you didn't know me, like, when you look at me, do you assume the same level of God's greatness as you would from a white male preacher? Like, when you see like a conference roster, right? And like when you look at the speakers and like when you look at your favorite speaker, you're like, yes, I'm so excited and I'm going to just glean from this person. And you may look at other speakers and you're like, oh yeah, I've never heard of that person. but maybe I'll go grab a coffee during that time, or you know what I mean? Like, that happens pretty frequently. And I would always share with some of my white friends, like, hey, like if I'm fully aware that when I'm on a roster, that the expectation level can sometimes diminish. And sometimes people have to kind of have to take an extra step to expect the same from me, that the Holy Spirit in me is the same Holy Spirit that speaks through some of these headliner white male pastors, you know. Oftentimes I look like somebody's intern from someone's perspective. I mean, like in 2020, when it was like the heat of the anti-Asian hate, and like, I mean, people were getting killed. It wasn't even just like, oh, you're getting hurt. People were getting killed. Women like me, multiple women in their late 20s, early 30s, were being stalked into their apartment and stabbed and killed, and you know, and so. And in that, I was in like the heat of it. And I remember doing a couple podcasts during that season. And I was just like, you know, when you look at me, when you talk to me, do you expect like, you know, like, do you see me as an intern, as somebody's executive assistant, or an accountant, you know, or do you see me as an anointed woman of God, an anointed person that could speak into crowds with authority? You know, and oftentimes that like somebody would have to kind of do loops and jumps in their mind to kind of get there because of a lot of the impressions and the prejudice that's out there. I've come to a place in life where, you know, I mean, I say all this passionately, and that's just because, like, you know what, I'm an Enneagram 8, and I don't know how else to talk, right? But like, yeah, I just don't know. Like, I want to like tone it down, but I just don't know how. But I've come to a place where like none of that really offends me at the moment, you know. And I'm not saying that to say, oh, look how much I've grown, but it's just simply because I don't exist to speak to crowds. Like I don't exist. I'm not here on this earth to prove anything to anyone. So I'm kind of at a place, and maybe motherhood did this to me, you know, but I'm at a place where, hey, if you overlook me, that's okay, because that's just between you and God. You know, it's not up to me to decide where my words land. It's just up to me to follow Jesus, to obey his leading, and he will decide where my words will go. He will decide what to do with my name. He will decide what to do with my platform. None of it is mine. And in all seriousness, you know, and a lot of the times when women of color approach me with the grief of, hey, like I have been stomped down, I have been overlooked, I have been undercut, and things like that. I mean, one, definitely we need to grieve with them, and definitely we need to sit with them in that place of loss, in that place of pain. However, afterwards, I would say, well, thank goodness that you do not exist to prove anything to anyone. You exist to know Jesus. Wow,
that's good.
You exist to love Jesus. And it's up to him. If he decides that I will be hidden for the rest of my life, let it be. You know, if he decides that I will be preaching to no one for the rest of my, let it be. You know, that's not up to me. I steward what he's placed before me, which is to love him with all my heart, to love those around me, and to speak when he tells me to speak, to go when he tells me to go. Everything else is up to Jesus.
I think that's so good. Thank you for going there. And to come back full circle to something that you shared about Joseph, I was just thinking about how there was also like if I was him, and I know that it's projecting me into the story, but I just observe of like he was forgotten about.
Yeah.
And he was overlooked. Like there was even somebody he told like, hey, remember me.
Yes.
Right.
And he was still forgotten.
That's
and
right.
So I think that we're not alone in the obscurity of if we do feel overlooked or neglected or forgotten, not to mention mistreated, and to get into all of those. But you know, the forgotten or unseen or obscure, Jesus was no stranger to that either.
Right.
There was 30 years of his life
Yeah.
hidden away, at least as we see it now. We only read about a few years of his life. And so thank you for sharing your experience. I'm really grateful for it. I think it helps me be more aware just in life, in leadership, in ministry, thinking about other people and their journey and the call of God that's on their life. And our passion too, Faith, is the next generation.
Yeah.
Young adults, millennials, and Generation Z. And you know this, we've talked about this. But I'd love to hear from your perspective what you're seeing among that next generation of maybe younger millennials, some of the Generation Z, when it comes to hunger, living a life of purpose, or even their faith in general.
I feel as though, I mean, Gen Zs and the younger millennials, there is this ability to think outside the box that I feel like us millennials, I think I'm considered a geriatric millennial. Like I think it's so weird, but I'm at the upper tier of the millennial generation. But I mean, for us, it was just very clear cut: go to college, find a job, get like find your retirement, retire. Like, it was just very clear cut. But I feel as though Gen Zs and younger millennials, they don't really see it that way. They don't have like a set lane, like, hey, this is the lane. For them, it's just a smorgasbord. And for them, like, hey, like I could try to do this. Maybe I'll do a trip here, and maybe I'll do some soul searching. Maybe I'll get income in this way and not with a typical job. Maybe I'll work from home. So I feel like there's just this openness to creativity and thinking outside the box. To me, I think that's really cool because I feel as though the church needs that.
Interesting.
The church really needs, I think we really need that creativity, that thinking outside the box. I think it will be just definitely a refreshing component to the next generation of church. I think especially like the older generations that are in the church, there's this fight to keep the traditional way of church. And I believe there are some timeless elements to church tradition that I feel as though we need to retain for sure.
Of course.
But I don't know. I feel that the younger generation is more open to keeping the essentials of the gospel and the essentials of the church, but also throwing out old wineskins. I feel like the ideas, the problem-solving abilities are wild amongst the younger generation that I'm really excited to see. And I feel that their perspectives are needed. Oftentimes how generations go, as you guys obviously know, generations usually go like with a pendulum swing.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. My hope is that the next generation will not be a reaction to the previous, but will be a collaboration.
Wow.
So these moments like this, where we're, as somebody that's a quote unquote geriatric millennial, right? That could, potentially be speaking to somebody that's Gen Z, I feel as though some of the most beautiful kingdom moments could happen with that collaboration of ideas, that the ability to sit at the same table and to work together, to speak together, and to think together. So yeah.
I love it. I love it. I would love to see or hear from you one step deeper when it comes to the next generation and young adult ministry. Like, why do you believe that young adult ministry is so vital and important in this day and age?
Oh yeah, it's the passing of the baton. And I think I'm reminded, right, in the Bible, I believe it was Hezekiah, right, who was just he prayed, God answered his prayer. He didn't have a premature death. It was just one of those things. And then and there was like a blunder where he basically opened the door to the enemy to plunder his kingdom. And really just made ruins for the next generation. And that's a terrible paraphrase, but that's just basically the gist, the highlight reel, if you will, of his story. I feel like sometimes we're like Hezekiah. We just kind of think about our own blessings and our own matters without realizing one day we're going to die, and and the next generation church is going to be in these young adults' hands. And we need to properly pass on the baton. I feel like Christianity can be such a self-centered endeavor. Um, Unfortunately, it's supposed to be all about loving Jesus and loving others, but it could be so much about me just growing into the person that I want to be. And I think a lot of times when that is the focus of church ministries, us just this is me about finding my rest, me about finding my peace, my purpose, my calling. We just completely forget that we could just get our self-enhanced self into the grave without setting the church up for the future, right? So that's a very like just kind of a rough way of just basically saying like we got to pass on the baton. So yeah.
That's so good.
Absolutely. I'm reminded of that. I've never thought of Hezekiah, though. I'm familiar with the story, of course, but I've never thought about the impact that that has on a generation.
Well, I think the word is like ramifications. Like each one of us, like we have something to offer God when He's asked us, like to go back to the stewardship. Even thinking of has asked us to steward things, to take care of things, whether it's our bodies, the temple, or our families, and beyond. Obviously, to do like beyond community with our own comfortable levels, but to realize like, wow, how do I live and leave a legacy that is beautiful and it is life giving and it's not the sloppy things that I didn't want to deal with as an individual or as a family or as a ministry or a church, whatever it is. I mean, it gets larger and larger, but the word that comes to my mind is ramifications.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that somebody else is going to pay for, I don't want to say our sins, that's not probably the right term, but for our mishaps maybe. And they can try to clean up the mess to relaunch or to regroup
Absolutely.
something.
The stakes are high when it comes to the next generation. And Faith, I keep an iPhone note in my phone, and you might know this, but Micah does for sure. And in March of 2022, I wrote this quote from you actually, and it says that the currency of the soul is good memories.
Mm.
And it's so powerful. And
Yeah.
that's the beauty of collaboration, to your point about working together and thinking together and sharing ideas at a table, sharing a meal together at a table. This creates memories, whether it's your family or a community,
Yeah.
and in leadership, in life. And even from being at a conference together, we have memories, great
Yeah.
memories. And we want to invite you and the listener to make some new memories, which are the currency of the soul. We hope that they're good memories. And what we do to close the show is put 5 minutes on the clock.
Yep.
And we ask you 5 questions, if you're up for it, that are a little bit rapid fire. And you've got about a minute to answer each one. You up for the challenge?
Absolutely. Let's
Okay.
go.
I'll kick it off.
You should kick it off.
Like, what is something that you're into on your days off right now for fun?
Oh my goodness, that's hard because I have no days off sometimes, but I love walking through Soho. I'm a girl that lives in the garden, which is New Jersey, but I dream in the city. So whenever I have a day off, I love just wandering. I love having no agenda and just walking through Soho, and especially when it's golden hour, it's another experience. So that's what I love.
Yo, great answer. Okay, question number 2. Do you have a favorite sports team?
Absolutely not. I wish I did. I guess the only thing I could possibly say is maybe the Giants. I mean, that's just because I've been to Giants games and my husband is a Giants fan. But no, I'm like the least sports-oriented person ever.
That's okay.
That's
okay.
Here's the one that keeps us on our toes.
It's a sports analogy, so get ready for it.
Okay, it's the curveball, right? It's like
in baseball.
Yeah. This one keeps Micah and I on our toes. We ask every guest, and you just flip the script. You can ask us any question. What would you want to find out?
Yes. If you guys were able to accomplish one thing together in your life and you'd be happy with it, what would it be?
Oh, wow. What do you want to answer separately, or are we going to collaborate our brains together?
Ooh, you start, and I'll see if there's anything to add.
Oh my gosh, one thing. Okay, we believe in living and leaving a legacy. So I think that's kind of like our house anthem, at least the season that we're in. So I would say it's a big blanket. Anybody that we've ever come in contact with, that they would know who we worship and what we stand for, and that the encounter they have with us is an encounter, hopefully a representation of Christ, and that they would become followers of Christ. And that's from our children to extended family to any stage we've ever stepped foot on, that people would encounter the presence of God, the Holy Spirit, and the word would just resonate within them. Even if they don't remember our names, but they would remember something about that God utilized us as a mouthpiece through the ministry that we're leading. But I think the ministry starts individually as a couple with our family and hopefully beyond. That's where my mind goes. To sound selfish, it's like a million wishes.
Yeah. I think that's it. I think if I was going to say it in my own words, I'd just say, like, if I pictured the end of our life rejoicing over one thing, or people saying thank you for one thing, I think it'd be really powerful. The problem that we want to solve is the exodus of young adults leaving the faith of Jesus Christ.
And so see hell empty.
Yeah. So if we can see a missing link in the family, or if we can see an absent generation reached with the gospel beautifully, and for them to actually see the goodness of God in the land of the living, that's our anthem. That's like what we're all about.
Yeah.
Good answer. Amazing. I love it.
All right. Well, back to you, Faith. Question number 4. Let's say you had the opportunity to travel one place that you've never been. Where would you go, and what snack would you pack? You have a go-to snack?
Oh my goodness. I would go to Italy. I've always wanted to visit Italy, and for no deep reason, I just want pasta, and I love pasta. And I think it's beautiful. And I feel like everyone's visiting Italy right now, so I feel as though like I'm a little bit of FOMO. Would I pack anything? I don't really pack snacks, so there's that.
You have the pasta awaiting you.
I was just gonna say, it's basically like a buffet.
I know. I'm the worst at this game. No, but I don't really pack snacks. I'm notorious to be a terrible traveler. Like, my husband knows this because I do travel often. I would be missing toothbrushes. And like, let alone pack a snack. I don't even know.
Next time, let your children pack your bag and see what you end up with.
Oh, mercy.
Hey, gummy bears, toothbrush. You never know what could be there or missing. I don't know.
Hilarious.
It's true.
Sorry.
Oh my gosh. Such a fun conversation, Faith. And I picture, the young leader, the young listener who's learning and growing. If you had one piece of advice that you could leave them with today, or one piece of encouragement for them to pack with them along the journey, what would you want them to know?
It is possible to have joy while you endure it. I think sometimes, they already probably know, oh yeah, you shouldn't give up. Yeah, like, oh, I get it. Like, you should have faith. I get it. I should have, I should endure. I shouldn't check out. There's a lot of that, but I think sometimes it's just easy to be miserable along the way. I'm a huge believer that joy is not circumstantial, but that it's in the presence of God. And so, as in to say, while you figure out your identity stuff, your calling stuff, your financial stuff, your inner healing stuff, because those early years are just all formation, so much formation, and it could be rough, it could be heavy, but it is possible to have joy as you do it. And that joy is a fruit of the Holy Spirit. Sometimes we just got to get out of the way so that he could produce it within us. So, yeah.
Amazing.
Oh my gosh.
I love it.
What a note to end on. And I agree. And we use this intro song that our friend who does hip hop music, he wrote a song called Fully Alive. So if you've never heard that song before, like what Faith is saying, that we want you to feel alive.
Right.
And
Yeah.
part of feeling fully alive is joy. And if
Yeah.
you're in a season where maybe you're not experiencing joy, that is an incredible prayer to ask God to show you what would joy look like today.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Like and to just say
Absolutely.
like, God, yeah, I might be struggling, but can we have some fun today?
That's right.
Because
Yeah.
following Jesus really shouldn't be boring. We should
Yeah.
be joy-filled people.
That's right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Faith, one more time, we just want to honor you and just say thanks for who
Yes.
you are, for the presence-filled, fired up person that you are. And we just value you so much. We're grateful for your voice and the way that you're leading, the work you're doing. We're really grateful.
Thank you. I loved being here. Thank you guys.
Excellent. Thank you so much. If you want to find out more about Faith and what God is doing in her and her husband's church at Mosaic Covenant Church and the Honor Summit, you can do that when you connect with us at www.youngadults.today, as well across all of our other social media platforms at youngadults.today. Until next time, this is Micah and Josiah signing off.